Thank you for coming. Anna, thank you for inviting me. That is quite an honor. And I'm closing this eye because with this eye I can see 2060. With this eye I can see 2040. So I'm closing this eye. I'm closing this eye. So the book I am holding and the flyer you see there are the flyer you see are the results of the talks that my husband and I began to give in 2011 in Estes Park. It was the request of a friend at a 4th of July celebration in Performance Park. I lost my husband in 2024. He was a historian. The subject was the loss of freedom and what freedom really means. And freedom, I think, depends on the individual. And I lost my husband in 2024, and I was a diplomat in the Foreign Service, of the Dutch Foreign Service. Lisa, can you hear me? Okay, yes. Okay, yeah. And so I was a diplomat in the Dutch Foreign Service, and oh, there's Mark. Okay, and I lived in 25 different countries, and that was my diplomatic career. Anyway, we have given many talks since, about 20 of them, in and around Estes and the Valley. I'm Dutch, and since 2006 I also have US citizenship. Now comes the hard part. My family and I, in World War II in the Far East, together with about 125,000 Caucasians and 140,000 military, that is the POWs, the prisoners of war, captured by the Japanese and imprisoned in approximately 460 concentration camps for nearly 4 years. What struck both my husband and I is that so little, and sometimes even nothing, seems to be known among the American public about that part of the world in the Pacific Rim, and about the crucial role the US played in our liberation. In Holland, it is a well-covered subject. Many Dutch people were in those camps. This year, 2025, it will have been 80 years that we were liberated, both in Europe and in the Pacific Rim. We should never forget, ever forget, the contribution and sacrifice of the US Army and the United States Army, especially in the Pacific. It proved indispensable to the defeat of the Japanese Empire. The Dutch had been in the Netherlands in the East Indies since the 17th century, when navigators from several countries sailed the seas looking for new territories and lucrative business with the trading of spices, silk, tea, porcelain, and such. The Dutch East Indies Company was founded in 1602 and brought many Dutch to the Indies, including my ancestors at some point. I will now pronounce the Dutch East Indies Company in Dutch, Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie. So, the invasion of the Dutch East Indies by Japan began in January 1942, but it had already embarked on a remarkably aggressive program of imperial expansion. In 1931, Japan invaded Korea and Manchuria is here. This is Manchuria. Here is this is Manchuria, and this is Korea. This is all of it is Manchuria. This is China and Singapore, but I'll talk about that later. So, Manchuria, and in 1931, Japan invaded Korea and Manchuria, turning them into puppet states under Japanese control. The next victim was the enormous but disorganized nation of China. Japan claimed that it was liberating the colored peoples of Asia from domination by white Europeans. However, the Imperial Army did not shy away from massacring local people in the process of conquest. They committed horrendous atrocities. Iris Cheng describes these in her book, The Rape of Nanking, The Forgotten Holocaust of World War II. A minimum of 40,000 civilians were murdered in Nanking alone. And I need to say that Iris Cheng, after the publication of her book, committed suicide. With the audacious idea of turning the whole Pacific into Japanese lagoon, Tokyo plotted the infamous sneak attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. From then on, Japanese forces swept like a tidal wave through the Pacific. They used bikes, motorbikes, taxis, boats, and all of them not in good shape. It had sharpened its teeth earlier in China. World War II hit home, hit my family. Japan's ideology was to create the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, and that was their whole idea. And that goes back 2,600 years with the creation of Japan. So Japan was created in 2,600. The entire world was to be immersed in Japanese culture around the worship of the emperor. Like the German allies, the Japanese adopted a sense of triumphal superiority. In World War II, Japan saw another chance. Consequently, all non-Asian citizens were separated from the local population to facilitate the indoctrination. However, it was a poor excuse, no more than a propaganda line. We were separated, that is true, but we were imprisoned in concentration camps. We were told to leave our homes and to carry no more than one small suitcase. After Pearl Harbor and through March of 1942, that is just 3 months, no more than 3 months, Japan completed its occupation of most countries of Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So there you see what Japan did, and this is New Guinea. This is New Guinea. This is the Philippines. This is Celebes. This is Java, and these are the Sumatra, Bali, Timor, and all those islands. But this is also what Japan did was completely take possession of all this area, Philippines, New Guinea, and so on and so forth. Java, Sumatra, Flores, Timor. I was born on Flores on this side. So anyway, this is Burma, and this is Thailand, and so on and so forth. So this is Japan, but Japan was not Japan was the aggressor. So after Pearl Harbor and through March of 1942, that is 3 months, Japan completed its occupation of most countries of Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So that is the map there. In those months, Japan erected camps. These were either barrack camps of bamboo and straw, those were our camps, or parts of towns surrounded by barbed wire. We were transported to our camps in open trucks, and I described that in my book because it was hot and bumpy and terrible, and I remember that. On rickety ships, or marched to our prisons through steamy jungle. And the jungle is steamy if you ever have been in the jungle. The prisoners were split into men's camps, POW camps, that is the prisoners of war, and camps for women and children. Only very few camps were family camps, and I saw the camp in Los Baños in the Philippines, where I was, and that was not a good camp either. No, not a good camp either. So there were about 360 civilian camps all over Asia, and more than 100 POW camps, the military, in the Pacific Rim. As I mentioned before, about 125,000 Caucasians were interned in the civilian camps, and about 140,000 POWs in the military camps. The local population stayed out of the camps. However, they helped us with endangering their lives. They gave us food, they gave us, and the local people were fabulous, wonderful to us. But they endangered their own lives because if the Japs caught them, they were hanged or murdered or something. The conditions in the concentration camps were abysmal. dirt and dust, insects, snakes, no medicines or dressing. Hygiene was miserable, latrines and septic tanks overflowing. No, nothing, no clothes, no nothing than what we wore entering the camp. There were some sewing machines, but that was miserable because what they wanted to do was the sewing machines wanted to make military uniforms for the Japanese. So, without exception, the Japanese commandants were brutes, absolutely brutes. Some camp commander had wound sickness and he was absolutely crazy. Many of their victims were killed in the most brutal medieval ways. 1 out of 8 prisoners died due to sickness, malnutrition, and overall lack of amenities. The camp of my mother, brother, and I had 1,641 prisoners. We counted 37 deaths. At the time of our imprisonment, my mother was 26 years old, my brother not yet 1, and I was 2.5 years old. The ground was comprised of red dirt. When I was 4 years old, I was forced to clean the latrines, and I can still smell that in my nostrils today. I was an adventurous child, and I wanted to go to the kitchen, and I saw these heaps of ashes, and I can still hear the sound of my scream because the ashes had charcoal in them. And I can still hear my scream out of the depths of my soul, and my mother was cold, and she tore up one precious blouse in bandages to keep the flies away. We were always hungry. We always had a hunger in our stomachs. Prisoners per camp ranged between 100 to 5,000. There were several camps of thousands of prisoners. Deaths ranged from none to 750 per camp. Our sleeping bunks were barely 20 inches wide. Our food rations were of the starvation diet variety. The Japanese plan was a slow, total death of all the victims. Our camp had the misfortune, on top of everything else, to be bombed twice by the Allies, who took us for the enemy because the Japs had omitted to mark our camps as one for women and children. We moved to another camp, jungle camp, which was more miserable than the first. When the bombings occurred, our mother put our heads in the dirt so that we would not go deaf from the bombing sounds. She had to be careful to avoid the feces from other prisoners. The POWs fared even worse. The Bushido warrior code of Japanese soldiers, the samurai, dating back as well to the founding of the empire 2,600 years ago. And they considered white men who were captured totally despicable and deserving of death by starving, working to death, torture, or by general mistreatment. The butchery, the savagery are unimaginable. You may have heard of the Bataan March, Death March, 70 miles of torture and beatings to Camp O'Donnell, and of the hell ships with captives bound for slave labor in Japan. And when I say hell ships, it was hell on those ships. After the Dutch East Indies fell, my father, physician in the Netherlands East Indies Army, he started his own practice at some point, had orders to join the Allies in Australia. With 5 other officers, he escaped the Japanese in a pearl schooner, and it was a pearl schooner that was almost falling apart. And I have the book I have the pearl schooner on my book there. And the Dutch on the pearl schooner and crossed the ocean from the Dutch Indies to the north coast of Australia. A harrowing journey that took 14 days. It's all in my book, I described it. This forcibly separated our family for the duration of the war. So that is the map there, that is the map. However, had he stayed, he might not have survived the war, captured as a POW. You may have heard of my family, our clan, captured, my family, our clan, so to speak, young and old, were dispersed all over the East Indies, except for one uncle who was transferred to the Burma Railroad, made known by the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai, more fiction than fact, a romanticized production. It is impossible to film the horrors and random savagery taking place in these camps. Burma, 750 miles through fearsome jungle with tigers, scorpions, monsoon, storms, business, beatings, and starvation. The Allies finally succeeded in bombing the railroad, and it was never in operation. My father's brother, with 16 others, was captured. They had refused to sign a Japanese document obliging them to give the names of people suspected of sabotage. They languished in jail for over a year, and then came 1943. On September 23, 1943, all of them were beheaded. More, among them 3 women. And yes, my uncle, who was a father, a brother, a son. Decapitation was the Japs' favorite form of execution. More family news. My grandfather was in jail. My aunt on death row, but lived till war's end. Other family members had house arrest and overcrowded houses, and were in different camps, with the same treatment of death, dirt, starvation. My nephew Michiel had problems, huge problems, with the beheading of his father, so much so that he ended up committing suicide. You may understand that I have limited sympathies for the plight of the Nisai, American citizens of Japanese ancestry, that were housed in locations in California and elsewhere in the US. This was war. Japan was the enemy. And Hawaii, by the way, was a nest of spies. This was war. This was war. It is true enough that the lot of the Nisai was unenviable, but these people were not exposed to the brutality, filth, beatings, starvation of the Imperial Japanese Army. The imprisonment lasted till war's end, 15th of August 1945. After Little Boy and Fat Man, the 2 atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima had forced Japan's surrender. The battleship Missouri in the Bay of Tokyo was the scene of the official signing of the instruments of surrender on September 2nd, 1945. This year, 80 years ago. The battleship was overcrowded with military personnel, and General Douglas MacArthur was there, of course, and among other generals who were all witnesses to the surrender. Upon the peace declaration, chaos ensued. The prisoners did not know where to go. We had nothing left, no money, no clothes, and above all, no homes. No homes. The Allied troops arrived and transports began to various cities. After 1 month, while we stayed in the camps, not sure where to go yet, my father had finally located us through endless lists of prisoners, and he found us. And I remember that when I saw him, a tall man, a very tall man, handsome looking man. And I said, well, who is this man? Because we were used to Japanese people. Who is this man? And that my mother said that it's your father. What is a father mean? What does a father mean? We were totally confused. He took us by different airplanes to Bandung on the island of Java, where we were reunited with those members of the clan that had survived. The camp commandants, the camp commanders, the generals, the Japanese war criminals were tried at the International Military Tribunal of the Far East by the Allies in Tokyo that lasted well through 1948. What did they all talk about, do you wonder? Some of them were hanged. Much to the dismay of the ex-prisoners, the Japanese government pays yearly visits to the temple shrines to pray for their souls. And I say, why not? We returned to Holland for our recovery and needed to come to grips that the life that we had known before 1940 was gone. We lived in our grandmother's house, a huge home on the canal that was built in 1793. My grandfather had died of lung cancer during the war in Holland. When we were well enough, we returned to the Dutch East Indies. Sadly enough, the country turned into shambles after it had received its independence from the Netherlands in 1949. Indonesia, the new republic, could not handle the situation. For my parents, it proved impossible to resurrect our previous lives. And after a few years, they decided to return to Holland again to start afresh. And we lived again at my grandmother's house for another year or so until we were cured of our illnesses. All of this is in my book, but of course more extensively. I will show you now, I now brought some books also. I will show you now some photographs. These were taken by Eleanor Roosevelt and Edwina Mountbatten and other Westerners. I have a map of that picture there, and I also have a book of selected bibliography. So can you start so this is the wedding of my grandparents. Okay. This is my father, my grandfather, my mother, myself, my baby brother, and grandma. In uniform. These are our wonderful captors. And I asked the Foreign Office if they could not please send me to Japan because I would be hurting. And they had many people, many Dutch people who did not want to go to Japan because of our concentration camps. Okay. These were our camps. This is where, and then when you think of the beautiful homes that we left, and the dirt is, you can't see the dirt, but the dirt was red dirt. Okay. These are the camps. This is where we lived. This is where we lived. And this is also the camps. This is also more of the camps. You see all the clothes that are hanging and washed somewhere, and yeah. Okay, this is also more of the camps. This is, and the bunks were no more than 20 inches.
The microphone so we can hear you.
Oh. Well, did you hear me?
Yes.
Who would have taken these pictures?
That is Eleanor Roosevelt or Westerners.
This was immediately after the war then they came?
No, they during the war, and Westerners, they had to hidden cameras.
Oh.
Sometimes. And Westerners who had hidden cameras.
Oh.
This is more of the camp, and that is, yeah. Okay. This is how we washed our hair when we were at the water pump, and washed ourselves if we could, because sometimes the water was very low. Okay. This is Life Must Go On, and this is a Indonesian fellow doing the hair of someone else. Life must go on. That's what my mother always said, and she hoped she went by a cemetery, and she knew that she could not have her kids die of malnutrition, and she knew that she had to be strong and try not to have us starvation. So life must go on. This is also at the camp, a camp. This is also our camp. It was horrible, and these are the nuns at our jungle camp. The jungle camp that I mentioned that was after the bombing. And after the bombing, we had the nuns at the boss camp that we called it, the forest camp. This is another camp. There were so many camps. There were 360, and there were all over Indonesia, all over the Manchuria, all over the coast, Hong Kong, Burma. These were napkins or the clothes on the line, and sometimes they were stolen by prisoners who wanted them for themselves. This was the bombing. This was the bombing of our camp, and we were moved to the what we call the Boskamp, but the forest camp. And that was when my mother put our heads in the dirt and had to, so that we would not get deaf from the sound of the bombs. This was people looking for whatever was left after the bombing. This was also the bombing of our camp. And we were marched, and I remember that march because I was old enough. And I remember that march, and it was so hot, it was so terribly hot. This is the decapitation of an Australian man, and that is the preferred, or the preferred execution of the Japs. This is horrible, but this is an Australian man, POW, death of a POW. This is our cemetery. And this is it.
I think we have a little time if anyone has a question that they would like to ask.
Is the picture on your book, is that your grandmother's place?
Yeah, this is my grandmother's place here. And this was the Perils schooner. This is my
That's the one your
grandmother's
father
place.
used, yeah.
And this is my grandmother's place.
Is that house still there, or is it still in the family?
It is, the house is still there, but it is now in apartments.
Oh,
It has apartments now, but we sold it at some point.
when's the last time you saw it?
I saw it in 2016, I think. Yeah.
How long did your parents live?
Oh, they lived till, my father lived till 82 and my mother till 89.
Yeah.
So, if anyone wants to buy a book, then it's here.
Any more questions?
I got one more.
Yeah.
Did you see, you said you were in a woman and children camp, right? Did you see other POWs, you know, on marches, or you just
No.
heard about this after? You only saw your camp?
Yeah, we only were in our camp.
I see.
Yeah. So anyway, it was and it still lives in our family. It still lives in our family because every now and then memories come up, but I'm here now, so I'm not confronted with these questions and these memories. So that's a good thing. Because it lives through our family. It does. The father who was beheaded and all those things.
What do you remember smells the most, or what memories come back?
Oh, the memories come smells and heat and food rations and I still have marks on my ankles of that fire that the ash that I tried to climb, and I was an adventurous child. Yeah.
How old were you when you moved to the United States?
How old were I when I left the United States?
When you moved here?
Oh, in my 60s, I think. Because I was born in 1939, so I lived the camp. I did the camp, and I remember the camp, and I talked to my mother, and I said, "You have to talk to me." And she did eventually, and with tears and hiccups and all that. But she told me everything of the camp, and it's in my book.
Where did you live in Nederland?
Where did I live in Netherlands? In all over the place, because I was in the diplomatic service, and in the Netherlands I lived, I don't live in the Netherlands. I didn't live in the Netherlands, and it was in, if I did live in the Netherlands, it was in Breda. Breda.
Where the Kaana is.
What was that?
Where the Kaana is.
Huh?
Where the Ka'ama is?
The Bataan?
Ka'ama? I'm
The
not
Dutch
sure.
Military Academy. Kaana.
Where the Dutch Military Academy is?
Oh, that is in
Breda.
Breda, yeah.
Yeah.
That is in Breda. And it's a big building, it's a beautiful building. It's and it has water, and it is surrounded by water. It's a beautiful building.
How long did is your brother still alive?
Yeah, my brother is still alive. He lives in Breda. And he has a wife and 2 kids and 3 grandkids and all that sort of thing.
Hulda, do you still feel the effects of hunger, starvation? Do you still feel those things today?
Well, I try not to be hungry. I try not to be hungry. And what my mother told me was, you never leave any food on your plate. And I never leave any food on my plate. Because, you know, of the camp. You never leave any food on your plate.
Yeah, Lisa.
What made you decide to go into the diplomatic corps?
What did you do?
What made you decide to go into the diplomatic corps?
Oh, because I wanted to travel. And I wanted to travel, and I did travel. I lived in 25 countries, and that is why I hate dictatorships. I just abhor dictatorships, and that is also part of my concentration camp feelings. But I wanted to travel, yeah, and my first posting was Damascus in Syria, and I went to Palmyra, and I went to Tadmor, and all those things, and I sat on camels, and that's wonderful. It was wonderful experience. But Palmyra is now ruined, and there is nothing else left of Palmyra. Well, a little bit, but Palmyra was a wonderful place.
Yeah.
What's your sense of the latest Dutch elections?
Huh?
What's your sense of the latest Dutch actions?
Elections.
Elections, sorry.
Huh?
What's your sense of the latest elections?
Oh, latest elections.
Dutch elections.
Latest Dutch elections.
Oh, the latest Dutch elections. Well, we still have too many parties, and we still have not a government yet. So, and they try to make a government, but that is impossible with so many parties. So, we still don't have a government. or the Netherlands still doesn't have a go on.
I wanna wish you an early birthday. I heard that it's your birthday this Sunday.
Uh-huh.
Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Hulda. Happy birthday to you.
How old are you? 14 years less than 100.
Oh,
86?
6.
86.
Wow.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming, and all of you, and all of my friends. That is wonderful to see you all here. Thank you very much for coming.
If we buy a book, will you sign it?
Uh-huh,
Okay, good.
uh-huh.
All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.